People are dying to keep America's biggest secret, literally. For the first time in history, open congressional hearings have exposed a secret U.S. UFO crash retrieval program, and the evidence suggests the government may have killed to protect it. Grab your tinfoil hats. Today on the Infographics Show, we're revealing why UFO whistleblowers are ending up dead or silenced. During World War II, the Vatican allegedly helped U.S. intelligence locate a site once controlled by Mussolini's military. Inside was a crashed UFO, still largely intact and unmistakably non-human. This isn't the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster, but the claim of a whistleblower, David Grush. As a former senior intelligence official, Grush had access to the most sensitive secrets in America. His duties included preparing the president's daily intelligence briefing, a job reserved for the most trusted in the intelligence community. But Grush's story pushes the limits of belief. Secret crash retrievals, recovered alien bodies, and even possible direct contact with extraterrestrial life. He says the U.S. government would kill to keep it all hidden, and while he claims to have compelling proof, he can only present it behind closed doors, inside a classified, sensitive compartmented information facility, or SCIF, an ultra-secure room built to block out any form of eavesdropping, where the most guarded secrets in America are discussed. So how can Grush have evidence without giving evidence? Well, it's all in the reaction to his claims by members of the intelligence community and beyond. That includes the Inspector General of the intelligence community, whose investigation found Grush's claims credible and in need of immediate action. So what is Grush saying, and why would it put his life and the lives of others in danger? Grush is a combat veteran and former Air Force intelligence officer who made the leap to federal service working with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office. In 2019, Grush was assigned to represent his agency in a Department of Defense investigation into unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs. During that work, he uncovered evidence of a secret crash retrieval program, one he was denied access to. Over the next 4 years, he interviewed around 40 people who claimed first-hand knowledge of U.S. crash retrieval operations. These individuals also informed him that on some of these occasions, non-human biologics, possibly extraterrestrials, had been recovered, along with the craft or remains of a craft. However, what disturbed Grush the most was evidence that crimes had been committed to keep these programs a secret, including murder. This is what ultimately led to Grush becoming a whistleblower, and it almost cost him his own life. It wasn't the existence of a UFO crash retrieval program that disturbed Grush, but the evidence of the crimes committed to keep it secret, and by the fact that it operated outside Congress's oversight. He first raised the issue through internal channels. He briefed his chain of command at the National Geopolitical Intelligence Agency, then the UAP task force that he'd been assigned to help. When these failed to produce any results, he turned to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, both responsible for overseeing all of America's ongoing intelligence operations. These closed-door meetings, however, also failed to produce any results, and Grush, fearing an abuse of power akin to the CIA MKUltra tests, decided to go public. His first stop was the Inspector General of the intelligence community, responsible for handling internal concerns and enabling whistleblowers to report dangerous or illegal actions. The IG labeled his complaint as being of urgent concern, a designation that prompted an investigation and reporting to both the Congress intelligence committees. The subsequent investigation discovered that Grush's claims of both a crash retrieval program and his harassment by the intelligence community, including threats of bodily harm and death, were, quote, credible and urgent. But with no action being taken, even as Grush was being increasingly harassed, he decided to go public to protect himself and push for greater government transparency. His first interview was the debrief, though he carefully avoided speaking on anything that was still classified. Numerous open-door congressional hearings followed, with lawmakers finding Grush's testimony so compelling that they've spent 2 years requesting a SCIF from the intelligence community. Without that secure facility, he can't share exact details publicly. Doing so would violate his non-disclosure agreements and risk up to 30 years in prison. So, is Grush really telling the truth? And who is getting hurt over what could be the biggest secret in human history? First, there's no objective way of verifying Grush's story, given that the actual details remain undisclosed. But we can start to paint a picture by looking at how certain groups and individuals have reacted, along with publicly known information. We have to start with the Inspector General. We don't know how they came to the credible and urgent conclusion. Their own report remains classified. But it's reasonable to assume that through having the same clearances as Grush and talking to the witnesses that he had spoken to. Grush also claims that he had discovered documentation of said crash retrieval program. If freed from his non-disclosure agreements, he could give names of witnesses, dates and places, and the exact locations of where some of these retrieved objects were being kept. While the IG wouldn't have had access to those locations, they likely were able to review at least some of the documentation that Grush had discovered. Then there's the reaction by the intelligence community, which for 2 years has made the incredible move of denying Congress the use of a skiff in order to fully debrief Grush. If there was no secret, or if Grush was delusional, then why deny a skiff in order to put the whole thing to rest? Shortly after Grush went public, his private medical records were leaked to the press, showing that Grush had suffered from PTSD and depression as a result of his military service. To many, this was an attempt to discredit him, though it probably would have worked better if it had been revealed Grush had schizophrenia or a record of bad conduct. Part of Grush's claims is that private American aerospace companies are in on the program to recover crashed UFOs. In fact, they're in on it by design. Apparently, way back when the program officially started in earnest, a decision was made that the secret was too big for even lawmakers to handle. Thus, all recovered materials were made the property of private aerospace giants, such as Lockheed and Boeing. This way, all materials related to the program would be exempt from congressional oversight or Freedom of Information requests. Technically, the UFO crash retrieval program was now a private enterprise one. This brings us to the modern private aerospace response to Grush's claims. When presented by journalists, these companies have repeatedly said such questions should be directed to the Pentagon. It's a curious answer, since if nothing existed, they could simply state, "We have no recovered craft or materials." These statements may have been shaped by legislation then under consideration in the Senate. In the fiscal year 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, lawmakers added several UFO-related provisions. Chief amongst them was the creation of a National Archives UAP records collection, a central repository for all federal reports on UAP incidents, past and present. A presidentially appointed special counsel would review older documents to decide if declassifying them could threaten national security. The second provision was a prohibition on all funding for UAP-related activities unless such activities were under the direct oversight of Congress. This includes any materials or other UAP-related evidence or discoveries. This was an attempt to curb any further illegal operation of UAP programs that evaded congressional oversight and came with serious penalties for anyone caught doing so. The last provision, however, is the most important one, and one that was never passed as it was voted down by key congressional members. Included in both the 2023 and 2024 National Defense Authorization Act was a key provision that would have enacted eminent domain over all UAP-related materials held by any organization receiving any funding from the U.S. government. In essence, this means that private American aerospace would have had to hand over their recovered UAPs and UAP materials if enacted into law, or face serious legal prosecution. The provision passed the House but was struck down in the Senate, with Republicans Mike Johnson, Mike Turner, Mike Rogers, and Mitch McConnell playing key roles in blocking it and stonewalling other UAP-related legislation. Their efforts significantly weakened the 2024 provision to establish a UAP records collection in the National Archives. The original draft required releasing all UAP records dating back to just after World War II. In the final version, disclosure is no longer mandatory. Documents can remain classified if a committee deems them vital to national security. Aerospace's response to Grush's claims makes more sense given the growing push at the time to use eminent domain on all UAP materials. If they had publicly stated that they possessed none, and then the government seized them, they could face serious legal jeopardy, making their referral to the Pentagon for comment far more understandable. The repercussions of Grush's claims being true could be disastrous for public trust in its own government. Perhaps this is why someone within the government and private aerospace has apparently been attempting to silence whistleblowers and researchers. And before we continue, we would like to state that everyone at the Infographics Show is happy, healthy, and has no plans to leave the chat, just for the record. Grush says he was immediately harassed and retaliated against by members of the intelligence community to keep him from speaking to Congress. According to journalist Leslie Kean, who broke the 2017 Navy UFO video story, the escalating harassment, including threatening phone calls to his home, ultimately pushed him to go public. Luis Daniel Elizondo, another high-profile whistleblower and former intelligence official, has echoed claims of intense threats and harassment by members of the intelligence community. In 2024, Elizondo stated while on the Good Trouble Show podcast that, quote, "I am not prone to accidents. I'm not abusing drugs. I'm not engaged in any illicit activities. If something happens to me or my family members in the future, you will know what happened." This came amid an intense campaign against him and other whistleblowers after the 2017 Navy UFO videos, leaked by Elizondo himself. Republican Congressman Tim Burkett took the threat seriously enough to push for stronger whistleblower protections. In an interview with News Nation, whistleblower Jake Barber described just how severe the threats had become. When he went to congressionally appointed investigators for help, they instead asked him for help protecting themselves. Jake Barber's own whistleblowing was spurred on by his alleged involvement in part of the crash retrieval program. Never officially briefed in, Barber worked as a helicopter pilot for an elite unit in the U.S. military. During his service, he flew several missions to recover anomalous craft or debris. It was the recovery of an egg-shaped craft that seemed to have a psychological effect on him, making him realize what he was flying around. Per Barber, as his helicopter began to lift the attached egg-shaped craft, he was overcome with a feeling of sadness that he felt was emanating from the craft itself. It was so disruptive that he began to cry to the point that it interfered with his ability to pilot his craft. Interestingly, other whistleblowers claim that the UAP phenomenon includes a psychic component. And today, Barber is part of Skywatcher, a group that's documented themselves using psychics to successfully make UAP appear on camera. Barber even claims the U.S. government regularly uses psychics to interact with UAPs and sometimes force them to land. For those familiar with the government's history with psychics, this aligns with accounts from figures like Joe McMoneagle, a remote viewer who received the Legion of Merit for his work in U.S. intelligence operations. President Jimmy Carter himself commented on the use of psychics by the CIA. In an interview with GQ magazine, he recalled the crash of a small American plane somewhere deep in the African jungle. After satellites and ground teams failed to locate it, the CIA turned to a psychic, who provided the exact latitude and longitude coordinates. The plane was found precisely where they said it would be. What's worrying about Barber's claims is that he too professes knowledge of murders carried out against whistleblowers and those who got too close to the truth. According to Barber, congressionally appointed investigators looking into the validity of the crash retrieval program were so scared by reprisals that they asked him for tips on how to protect themselves. However, this has not been verified outside of Barber's account. If what Barber says is true, then this means that a secret cabal within the U.S. military, intelligence, and private aerospace is exercising the power over life and death in extrajudicial killings. If true, a decades-long legacy of murders might be a big enough secret to resist all attempts to expose it. Never mind the existence of alien life or recovered alien technology. It's difficult to find direct evidence of these murders outside of the claims of the whistleblowers. What we do know is how far someone in the government is willing to go to discredit UFO researchers and whistleblowers and completely destroy their lives. Paul Benowitz is a name spoken cautiously by members of the UFO research community. Benowitz lived near Kirtland Air Force Base in the late 70s to early 80s and had always had a strong interest in UFOs. After repeatedly seeing mysterious lights over the base, he began monitoring it with radio gear and video cameras, capturing multiple anomalous events. His mistake was in contacting the base's Office of Special Investigations. The public story is that the Air Force was concerned that Benowitz was picking up data on secret Air Force projects and thus began a disinformation campaign targeting him directly. They began to meet with Benowitz, feeding him false narratives about aliens and even giving him fake classified documents. The Air Force even staged UFO sightings by using various aircraft at times that Benowitz was told to be on the lookout by his insider sources. The flood of fake evidence drove Benowitz to have a psychotic breakdown from the stress, resulting in him being hospitalized in 1988. Benowitz, who until then had been heavily involved in UFO and cattle mutilation research, withdrew from the UFO field entirely, dying quietly in 2003. The Benowitz disinformation campaign ruined one man's life and has been compared to similar disinformation campaigns throughout history, such as the one that fed fake invasion plans of Europe to the Nazis during World War II. As has been repeatedly noted, the best disinformation always contains some truth. After all, the phenomenon that Benowitz initially recorded was also being seen around the world, far from US bases. But one element from Benowitz's disinformation would ring true years later in the 1990s and lead to what could be the first publicly known case of a UFO-related assassination plot. Phil Schneider claimed to have worked with the US government building deep underground military bases across the Southwest. In the 1990s, Schneider began speaking publicly about one construction project, claiming workers encountered hostile aliens already living underground. He said he lost several fingers and suffered other injuries in the confrontation. In 1996, Schneider was found dead in his apartment, a rubber surgical catheter tied tightly around his neck. The circumstances immediately raised alarms among skeptics. Schneider was missing several fingers, had limited shoulder mobility from an injury he linked to the alien firefight, and was battling advanced cancer along with other chronic illnesses. But the timing of the death is also claimed to not be a coincidence. Schneider was discovered dead shortly after making a series of talks on specific black-budget programs he said the government was operating. Lecture materials, photographs, and other personal papers were all stolen from his house when the body was discovered. However, Schneider remains a divisive figure even amongst the UAP-believing community. For starters, there's no direct evidence that Schneider ever worked for the government. While he showed various badges and IDs allegedly issued to him on these programs, none could be verified as authentic. Schneider presented photos of massive tunneling machines and underground facilities he claimed to have taken. However, experts noted his descriptions of the tunneling methods didn't match any known engineering techniques. The Schneider case remains unsolved, and a potential murder may itself not be directly linked to his alleged whistleblowing. Perhaps due to his failing health, he paid or asked someone to help him ease his suffering. It's difficult to nail down specific deaths linked to U.S. government cover-up efforts, but the precedent is certainly there given what we know about the CIA activities during MKUltra and other top-secret projects during the early Cold War. In fact, it is exactly these CIA operations, some ending in recorded deaths and psychological breakdowns, that led to laws requiring all U.S. intelligence activities to operate under direct congressional oversight. And yet, more whistleblowers are coming forward. They're backed by a growing network of former special forces and intelligence colleagues. Together, they allege a program that not only operates outside congressional oversight, but openly violates the law through extrajudicial killings. If this is true, then a secret cabal within U.S. intelligence and aerospace is hiding the existence of alien life from humanity. They've also subverted American democracy itself, while holding funding and technologies that could make them an unstoppable threat. If that's the case, then aliens may be the least of our concerns. If whistleblowers are dying under suspicious circumstances, what's being hidden could be even more disturbing. Watch Military Can't Explain These UFOs at US and Russian nuclear weapon sites to see the strange events they might not want you to know about, or click on this video instead.